finally, one was captured on video. And the footage is very impressive. Jonas started on level 18, and to make the level transition, he first had to clear 130 lines. He ended up getting 92 of those lines via Tetrises for maximum points, while just 38 were from birds. From there, Jonas was playing at the brutal speed of level 19, but he still had to keep landing Tetrises. His score was inching up as the levels climbed higher. He needed the max out before hitting level 29. On level 28, he was still 60,000 points away, with only 10 lines to work with. But he managed to get one Tetris, and then with just a single line to go before the transition, he got one final Tetris. The kill screen kicked in, and the score read all nines. Over the course of 8.5 minutes, Jonas had hit a max out on NES Tetris. And finally, it was documented for anyone to see. The feedback online was all positive. Everyone was thrilled to be able to watch an official Tetris max out. However, this video did have one problem. There was no game audio included. That meant Jonas couldn't submit it as a world record anywhere. But that didn't take away from the legitimacy of the performance. Jonas Neubauer had established a name for himself as a Tetris master. Only question was, now that someone had maxed out the game, what was there left to do?
Kill screen. Oh.
Over the following few years, while competitive retro gaming was still in its infancy, more people gravitated toward playing NES Tetris. Even though Jonas had maxed out the score, it remained a popular game, and others tried to replicate his achievement. Between 2008 and 2014, more than a dozen other people were able to achieve max outs in NES Tetris. And even though their scores were officially tied, there were still ways to compare max outs to each other. Ultimately, two different methods of competing became popular. Method number one, going for the earliest possible max out. In Jonas's game from 2005, he hit the max out right as the level transitioned to 29. In other words, at the last possible moment. But the more Tetrises you hit, the earlier you can max out, and the more impressive the achievement. In April 2009, Harry Hong produced the first recorded max out with game audio. And he was able to get the max out slightly earlier than Jonas, late in level 28 rather than on the transition into level 29. Harry was one of several people who claimed to max out on internet forums years prior, but now he had recorded proof too. In early 2012, a player named Matt Bucco recorded a game where he maxed out in mid-level 26, much quicker than previous max outs. He landed Tetris after Tetris starting at level 19, which was where he pulled away from previous players. And then, there were a couple claimed early max outs. Harry Hong claimed an early level 26 max out on tape, but he didn't upload the score, only claiming it on a Tetris forum. And in August 2014, a player named Terry Purcell reportedly maxed out in late level 25. This score used to have video, but it's since been deleted from YouTube. Most of these players' only goal was to get an early max out. As soon as that happened, they stopped playing and let the game end, even if it was several levels before the kill screen. However, not everyone did this, and that's why there was a second method of competing. Playing the game all the way to the kill screen, and then manually calculating the score later. In other words, trying for the highest score possible. Even though the score doesn't display higher than all nines, you can
I
still
love
add up
summoning
all the points
salt.
achieved after this to determine your true score. For instance, in Jonas's first ever max out, he got a Tetris while his score read this. That meant he added 36,000 points, and his score actually finished at 1,018,160 points. And so, this became another method of determining who's maxed out.
Here goes the
best.
great cheese.
In 2008, Jonas achieved another kill screen that finished slightly higher than his 2005 max out, 1,023,860 points. However, since he used a camera from the 1800s, this was never verified as an official world In 2011, while recording himself for a documentary, Thor Ackerlund achieved a score of 1,043,000 points. And a couple years later, a player named Ben Mullen took the score even higher, 1,071,000 points, before the kill screen took over to end his game. However, if the players going for the earliest max out had finished out their games, it's possible they would have achieved higher scores than these.
Oh my goodness.
Level 25 max out is reported to have finished all the way at 1.195 million, but without video proof, this can't be verified. And although Matt Guko's score of level 26 cuts off right here, he claims to have kept playing this game all the way to the kill screen. And in the comments, he says he'd upload the rest when he got home. Well, it's 12 years later, and apparently Matt still hasn't returned home. So, the community was split between these two methods. Some wanted to go for the earliest max out, while others wanted to go for the highest score. The big problem was the score display. Since it only had 6 digits, it wasn't intuitive to keep playing after it maxed out. It led to 2 different sides of competitive play. And these sides wouldn't converge until one key event in 2015. This is a game genie code discovered by max-out player Josh Coles. It changes the leading digit of the score into hexadecimal, meaning that after 9, the score keeps counting up. A represents 1 million, B represents 1.1 million, and so on. This meant that the max-out no longer applied, and the score was no longer capped at 1 million. So, it ultimately garnered the nickname, the Uncapped Code. Josh posted his code on the Tetris forums, and it was treated as a fun novelty, but some saw potential for more with it. And in April 2015, Harry Hong began attempts to set a new high score with the Uncapped Code. On April 23rd, he played a game that maxed out in level 28, then took it to the kill screen and finished with 1,101,000 points. This was the first verifiable game to score over 1.1 million. And a few days later, he got one even better. A max out in level 26 that ultimately finished at 1,150,000 points. But after these records from Harry, the competition for the high score record died down. Harry Hong was one of few players who both cared about the high score record and was potentially good enough to improve it. So, when he stopped trying for it, there was no competition to take it from him. Instead, in 2016, he came up with the goal of achieving as many max outs as he could in a year, rather than improving the uncapped record. 268 max outs later, the high score remained at 1.15 million. But in 2017, Harry came up with a new goal for his stream. He was going to go back to playing with the Uncapped Code and try for a 1.2 million point game. This would surpass the highest claims from over the years and be an undisputed world record. Harry played for weeks, building up his skills but falling short of the 1.2. He'd need an early max out, in level 25 or better, and then still need to land several more Tetrises before the kill screen. A score like this demanded near perfection. But after months of attempts, on April 14th, 2017, Harry got a good score going. Max out in mid-level 25, Harry was on pace for it. From this point, he needed at least 5 Tetrises before hitting the kill screen on level 29. Harry got his Tetrises, but was still a few points short. With his stack building high, he desperately used a long bar to get a triple, but this activated the kill screen. He still needed 3,000 points. Harry had to find a way to clear 2 more lines while playing at kill screen speed. History was made. The congratulations poured in as Harry had taken Tetris to new heights. After all the max outs that came before him, from the internet claims to the ones with concrete proof, this one was the best of all. Except, it's never quite that easy with NES Tetris. There are reports that, around the time of Harry's 1.2, a player named Bo Steele achieved a 1.2 million game of his own. Nobody remembers what his exact score was, or what the level of proof was, but Bo is a verified max-out player, so his score claim isn't unreasonable. Still, Harry Hong gets the most credit for being the first to achieve 1.2 million, and he was one of the best players in the world, one of the few who was capable of a score this high. However, as good as Harry was, there was still another player who had potential to go even higher. See, every year since 2010, the
Dude,
biggest
that
Tetris
was
tournament
so
was the
risky.
Classic Tetris World Championship, where the best NES Tetris players in the world competed. Of the 7 annual tournaments by this point, 1 had been won by Harry Hong. As for the rest, all 6 were won by the same player, Jonas Neubauer.
And your winner of the 2016 Classic Tetris World Championships, 6-time world champion, Jonas Neubauer!
In the 12
Yay,
years since the
Jonas.
first reported max out, Jonas had turned into a monster. Every year, he went head-to-head against Tetris' best players. And time again, Jonas proved better than the rest. His stacking was brilliant. He was able to get out of trouble when others couldn't. Jonas Neubauer was simply considered the best NES Tetris player on Earth. Yet, through all this, he never really cared about the score world record. He was more focused on tournaments. But in 2017, he started streaming on Twitch. And on July 24th, he booted up a casual game of Tetris. That was 17 straight Tetrises to open the game. Unbelievable. He slowed down a bit after that, but still managed to max out in mid-level 26. And then, he landed 6 more Tetrises before the kill screen. Jonas' score ran all night since he wasn't using the uncapped code, but in reality, his score was 1,211,000 points. On a random game where he didn't even bother to use the uncapped code, Jonas had just set a new world record. After this, Jonas went back to focusing on tournaments, not caring to improve the high score record anymore. And while other players continued to put up new scores, some of which were over 1 million, very few were able to approach a score of 1.2 million. This type of game was reserved for only the best of the best Tetris players, and even they couldn't consistently put up scores like this. It took a lot of luck to get long bars when you need them. So, Jonas instead prepared for the 2017 Classic Tetris World Championship. And that November, he officially made it 7 World Championship victories.
There it is! Jonas is your champion! 2017 champion!
There was nobody else on his level. And in June 2018, a year after his 1.21 million game, Jonas set out to improve the score world record, trying to take it to a level where nobody else could even touch it. This time, Jonas wasn't messing around. He was using the uncapped code, so he could know right away what his score was. On June 13th, he got a really good game going, a max out in level 25. After landing 5 more Tetrises, his score was just short of 1.2 million, with only 4 lines until the kill screen. Jonas built a center well, waiting for the long bar that would push him over the top. And then, he got it.
Let's go!
New world record, 1.23 million. But Jonas wasn't satisfied yet. A week later, he managed another level 25 max out. He then got 6 more Tetrises, pushing his score past 1.2 million. 1 more Tetris, and he'd have another record. But then, his stack started going high. Jonas wasn't getting a long bar, and running out of room. Yet he didn't panic, and finally, the long bar came.
Oh, let's go. Get out of my face.
A 15,000-point improvement to the world record. This was the state of NES Tetris in mid-2018. There were many good players. Some of them could score over 1 million points. But when all else was held equal, Jonas usually came out on top. He always won the world championship. He had the score record, and it was intimidating to compete against him. It seemed like, as long as he wanted to hold the high score world record, he'd be able to do so. That is, unless Corian had something to say about it. In 2016, a player named Corian posted a video of his first NES Tetris max out. By this point, several players had achieved max out, so the achievement alone wasn't too notable. However, when he posted a video with a hand cam, Corian was shown to be doing something very differently. He was mashing the D-pad to move the pieces laterally, rather than simply holding it down. In Tetris, there's a concept known as the delayed auto shift, or DAS. When you hold down the D-pad in NES Tetris, your piece will auto shift to the side every 6 frames, or 10 times per second. This is quite fast, and leaves you with enough time to navigate even on the breakneck speed of level 19. However, Corian is from Japan, and NES Tetris was never actually released in Japan. So, his background was from playing various other versions of Tetris, including the Game Boy edition. In Game Boy Tetris, when you hold down the D-pad, the piece hesitates momentarily and then moves roughly 7 times per second. This process is too slow when playing at higher levels, so Game Boy Tetris players have to repeatedly repress the D-pad to move their pieces quickly enough. And since Corian was used to playing this and various arcade games, it was only natural to match the D-pad in NES Tetris as well. But this actually gave Corian an advantage. He was able to accurately match faster than DAS normally moved the pieces. He could move blocks just a little bit quicker than normal, and it meant that once he reached the kill screen on level 29, he actually stood a chance to clear a few lines. He couldn't play for long, but it wasn't necessarily an instant game over. In June 2017, he managed to clear 10 lines on level 29 and reach level 30. Only a couple other players have ever done that before, and not surprisingly, they had to use a form of hyper-tapping to pull it off. Ultimately though, this just let Corian get a few more points before topping out. If he wanted to beat the score world record, he needed to focus on getting more Tetrises before the kill screen. He spent months improving his skills, and by August 2017, he became the 3rd player to pass 1.2 million. But as Jonas kept improving the record, Corian found himself falling behind. And by June 2018, the score to beat was 1.245 million. But Corian didn't want to give up. Even though he was a bit behind Jonas, the potential with hyper-tapping was just too strong. That summer, Corian began a push for the world record. And on June 24th, he had a strong game going. Landing Tetris after Tetris, Corian's score climbed past 600,000. Then, the game transitioned to level 19. This is where hyper-tapping would really come into play. Right away, he managed to get a long bar over in a spot that would have been risky with DAS. He kept on going, precisely navigating pieces while frantically mashing on the D-pad. He ended up maxing out the score during level 25, just about tied with Jonas's world record. The Tetrises continued, and eventually, Corian found himself at 1.22 million, with only one line until the kill screen. He just needed one more Tetris. Corian was praying that it would come in time.
One. Freeze! Freeze, come on! Yes! Woo! Yes! 1.25. Woo!
This was the first ever game past 1.25 million, and finally, 7 7-time world champion Jonas had been dethroned. This game helped prove the use of hypertapping. While Corion wasn't guaranteed to have topped out with DAS, there were definitely situations where hypertapping helped. The problem is, Corion was one of few players who could reliably hypertap. You not only had to mash quickly, but also do it in a controlled manner to always move your piece the exact right amount. Corion focused on other categories for the next few months, but in early 2019, he came back, looking to take the record closer to 1.3 million. And on March 5th, he'd get a good chance. His start was very smooth, and the only sketchy moment came at 800,000, when he misdropped and then narrowly brought a long bar over to the right in time. That's where hypertapping can help you. He ended up maxing out the score in late level 25. With 30 lines until the kill screen, Corion had just enough room to get 8 more Tetrises and finish off one more improvement to the world record.
Yes! Yes, I'm fitting my record! Yes!
This was a really great game, yet still remained 27,000 points short of 1.3 million. That score still seemed like a pipe dream. The only way to do it would be to get an earlier max out, and then match Corion's 8 Tetrises afterwards. And with Corion being one of the few hypertappers with the skill to do that, 1.3 million was just a bit out of reach.
Goodness, I hate this part. This part is torture.
Corion's 1.27 game, one of the strangest events in Tetris history took place. One day in June 2019, a man named Tyler Peach popped up in the Discord server. Tyler said he was from Germany, and that back in the mid-90s, he scored 1.33 million in a game of NES Tetris. This was a bold claim. For one thing, it was 60,000 points ahead of the current highest known score. And for another, the uncapped code didn't exist in the 90s. So how did he know what his exact score was? Tyler tried to convince people he was legit, but he came across as some random dude just making outrageous claims. So, to show his skills, Tyler said he would attempt to qualify for the July monthly tournament. And then, Tyler proceeded to post the highest qualifying score ever for a tournament. Only a handful of players had ever achieved the 1.2, and Tyler just did it on command to show his skills. He immediately began doing live streaming attempts to break the score world record, and just days later, he achieved a score of 1.298 million, smashing the world record by 25,000 points. He maxed out at level 24, one level sooner than Corion did, and proceeded to match his 8 Tetrises afterwards. And while Tyler didn't use a webcam, it seemed that he too was hypertapping. He was able to get his pieces to fly across the board. Who on earth was this guy? Were his scores faked somehow? Nobody knew for sure, and the top players had a variety of opinions. But there was nothing in Tyler's gameplay that screamed it was fake. The circumstances were just so weird. A legend from the 90s, who nobody had heard of before, coming back and crushing the competition. The story sounded too insane to be real. Well, months down the road, the truth came out. Tyler's scores were 100% legitimate, but he wasn't a real person. Tyler was actually the alt account of one of the best Tetris players in the world. He was the teenage prodigy, Joseph Saley.
Who?
Joseph came onto the Tetris scene in 2017 and spent hours watching the game's 2 best players, Jonas and Corion. He learned a lot from them, and Joseph's skills rapidly improved. By March 2018, he achieved his first max out. By September, his score was up to 1.15 million. In less than a year, he had become a world-class player. However, there were still a handful of players who had a better score PB. But a few months later came the 2018 Classic Tetris World Championship. Joseph entered the tournament and played beautifully, defeating opponent after opponent and making it all the way to the finals. And what a surprise! The other finalist was Jonas Neubauer, the 7-time world champion. Jonas was heavily favored to defeat Joseph and take home his 8th title. But in a shocking twist, Joseph swept Jonas 3-0.
And we have a new Tetris World Champion.
Joseph Saley was now a world champion. But despite that, he didn't have the score world record. That still belonged to Corion. So, in early 2019, he made an effort to take it. First passing 1.2 million, then 1.25 million. But he still remained a bit short of the record. And that's where he decided to have some fun. Joseph started streaming attempts to an alt account and built up the Tyler Peach persona. And even though he didn't do many attempts there, one of them ended up breaking a world record. So, he decided to roll with it, before eventually revealing that he was behind it all. So now, Joseph had them both, the championship title and the score record. But even beyond that, Joseph had one specific skill that no other Tetris player had. He could actually play on the kill screen. Joseph was a hyper tapper, and a very good one at that. He moved pieces quicker than anyone else. The kill screen kicks in on level 29, and in September 2018, Joseph became the first person to make it to level 31 on video. A month later, he became the first to make it to level 32. It was amazing. Kill screens are not meant to be playable, but Joseph was doing it. He couldn't go for long, but he was legitimately clearing lines and even full levels. He was even outsmarting the developers. Upon reaching level 30, the game's level counter appears bugged. Tetris's programmers did not expect anyone to make it here. Joseph was doing what was thought to be impossible. But as impressive as this was, it wasn't enough to get the score record. Joseph would still have to maximize his Tetrises earlier to really rack up the score. And not only that, but he wasn't the only one gunning for the world record. Harry Hong and
What the
Corey,
hell?
2 previous record holders in the category, were interested in trying as well. And so, it became a 3-way race between Harry, Corion, and Joseph for the first 1.3 million score in NES Tetris. Harry was the first to strike. In August 2019, he got a new high score of 1.275 million. This was short of the 1.298 world record, but those who thought Tyler P was cheating considered this score the official world record. Still, it didn't reach 1.3 million. Harry would have needed one more Tetris before the kill screen to push him over the top. Instead, maybe Corion could get the 1.3. He was the more recent record holder, and his personal best remained at 1.273 million. Perhaps his hyper-tapping skills would be enough to get him there. In November, Corion had a great game going. He got a max out in level 25, then landed 7 Tetrises, pushing his score past 1.2 million. After getting another Tetris, Corion was in position to crush his PB, and maybe get 1.3 million if he could just get one final Tetris.
なんとして23頑張ろう
Corion got a massive long run throughout and couldn't get the last Tetris he needed. But of the 3 players, the one with the best chance at 1.3 million was Joseph. He'd already gotten 1.298 million on the Tyler account. He only needed a tiny improvement to get him there. Well, that December, Joseph found himself in nearly the exact same position as Corion. A max out in level 25 and needing one more Tetris for 1.3 million. This could be it. But the long bar had to come in time.
Yes. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh
Joseph already had 1.3 million, but then he landed a Tetris on the kill screen. This move was only possible with good hyper tapping, not DAS. This gave him another 36,000 points.
Golly.
He passed 1.35 million.
Goodness.
It was the first time anyone had ever gotten substantial points on the kill screen in a record, and it raised all sorts of questions. Was this move realistic to replicate? How many kill screen points could you get? And since he was past 1.35 million, could Joseph get the score record to 1.4 million? This score would have nearly sounded impossible just weeks earlier, but now there was a blueprint. We'd already seen Joseph get 1.3 million points going into the kill screen. If he could land a few Tetrises and get 100,000 points on the kill screen, then that would be enough for 1.4 million. Joseph was the only player who could realistically do this, and a few months later when the pandemic hit, he decided to fully commit and make a push for the 1.4. This was going to be an intense grind. Joseph had to maximize points everywhere, both before and during the kill screen. For one thing, he decided to start on level 19 rather than 18. That meant the pieces fell faster, but it also allowed him to rack up more points, potentially 30 to 40,000 more than starting on level 18. And Joseph needed every point he could get. He couldn't afford to burn lines. He had to nearly exclusively go for Tetrises to maximize points. Yet, as tough as all this was, it was actually the easy part of the grind. The hard part was then scoring 100,000 more points on the kill screen. Joseph could score 1.3 million by level 29, but getting the last 100,000 at this speed was brutal. As fast of a hyper tapper as he was, the kill screen was still the kill screen. You're not intended to play at this level. And Joseph had run after run die after making it this far. Clearly, 1.4 million would require the stars to align. Well, that June, Joseph would get a chance. He got a max out in level 25 and arrived at the kill screen just shy of 1.3 million points. He'd been here before. Now, he had to make it to 1.4. Oops.
Hey, it's world record though. Nice.
A new record, but Joseph seemed to barely care. It was still 25,000 short of 1.4 million. This game really illustrates the dilemma when playing on the kill screen. Do you try and keep your stack low to survive as long as possible? Or try to rack up points quickly by going for Tetrises? Eventually, Joseph found a solution. Why not just get to the kill screen with a crazy score so you don't need that many points?
Come on.
Dude. You got it, you got it. No. It's not good. Oh my god! World record though. Dude.
This pace was insane. Even scoring just one Tetris on the kill screen would have been enough for 1.4. But Joseph couldn't survive long enough to get a Tetris. He topped out just 10,000 points short. Still though, clearly he was closing in on 1.4 million. It seemed like it could be just days away. Well, on June 14th, 2020, Joseph started the game on level 18 rather than 19 and set a score of 1.384 million. This was the highest ever score from a level 18 start, a notable achievement. So, Joseph stopped recording on OBS and uploaded the video to YouTube. But then, he forgot to hit record again and continued playing for the record. Joseph was oblivious to the fact that his gameplay wasn't being saved. And hours later,
No.
he allegedly achieved a score of 1.439 million. Honestly, this game can't be viewed today. He was streaming it to a Discord call though, and one of his friends was recording the audio of said call, where you can hear people freaking out at what Joseph was doing.
Oh my god. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? 1.4?
But there's no video to go along with this. According to testimony from those who watched it live, this was a crazy game in the kill streak. It allowed him to blow past the 1.4 million barrier, but only a select few were able to see it. And even though there's no recording, Joseph knew what he had done and had accomplished his goal. To this day, he's still never gotten a 1.4 on video. The following few months in 2020 were a strange time in Tetris history. Everyone knew the record was 1.4 million, but it technically wasn't official. It would still be a big deal the first time someone achieved 1.4 on video. That July, a player named Scotto Bozo tried using RNG manipulation to crush the world record. He was able to use a task to predict which pieces would come and plan ahead accordingly. However, his score of 1.5 million was quickly deemed to be a different category. So, the focus was back on trying to break 1.4. And while there were many new players getting into the game, one stood above the rest. His name was Dog Playing Tetris. In June 2020, he became the second person ever to achieve a score of 1.3 million. He was trying to get 1.4 million alongside Joseph. And while Joseph stopped playing after his unreported 1.4, Dog continued trying. He was perceived as the most likely person to pull it off.
Tired.
Dog was a hyper-tapper like Joseph, so he had the ability to play for a while on the kill screen. And by that fall, his score was up past 1.35 million. He was closing in, and his next PB could be the one. In October, he managed to get a max out early in level 24. This was definitely on pace for 1.4 million. But the Tetrises kept coming, and by the time he hit the kill screen, his score was already at 1.367 million. He only needed 33,000 points on the kill screen. Dog Playing Tetris had to hold it together.
Oh, come on, dog. You saw it, he fumbled. No.
He missed it by 14,000. This was still a new high score, but not enough to break 1.4. Even months later, the world had yet to see a score over 1.4 million on video. The combination of getting to level 29 on good pace and then getting enough points on the kill screen was just too much to ask. It almost mirrored the max out claims from decades prior. Even though a 1.4 million score had very likely happened, there was still no video of one for the world to see. It remained a nearly impossible score that existed only as a legend. Now, you might think this is all a build-up to someone finally breaking through, but that's not what happened. No, something much bigger was brewing in the background.
Hey, yo.
While much of the community was
Not
focused
far.
on trying for 1.4 million, little did any of them know that Tetris was about to go through a revolution. Everything was about to change.
What was about to change? Rolling? Oh, yeah. Where they roll their fingers on the back, pushing
For
their
years,
fingers.
there have been two ways to play it.
Hyper tapping and dash.
DAS and hyper tapping.
Oh, fucking
DAS was certainly easier, but hyper tapping had higher potential. That's how players were able to get points on the kill screen. Well, by 2020, the game's demographic at the top level had shifted younger, and virtually all of these new top players were hyper tappers. In fact, during that year's Classic Tetris World Championship, all of the players in the top 8 were hyper tappers. It had taken over at the top level. But as dominant as this technique was, it was quite difficult. Not many people could match that fast while still retaining good control. It limited the number of record contenders, and those who could hyper-tap sometimes developed arm and hand issues. Hyper-tapping was powerful, but it was still far from an feel technique. So in 2020, the game's new generation began looking for alternative techniques to match the D-pad. The leading theory was to try using multiple fingers instead of just one. Gaming legend Flyheck had a method for using 8 fingers on an arcade button, letting him match up to 30 times per second. He also had a modified method for the smaller buttons of an NES controller. However, Tetris players had to match the D-pad, and they struggled to adapt either of these methods. The D-pad seemed to simply be too small to use multiple fingers on. They needed a bigger button. That's where a player named Cheese found something brilliant. He watched Flyheck's videos and a matching video from Silverboxer, then combined them into his own technique. If the NES D-pad was too small of a button, why not use the entire back of the controller as a button? By resting a finger on the D-pad, you can roll your fingers along the back to push the controller into it repeatedly. This allows you to rapidly press the D-pad up to 4 times, or 5 times with the thumb at the end. That's just enough to move any piece to the far left or right, and you can reach speeds upwards of 20 presses per second, twice as fast as hyper tapping. It's also much easier on the hand and arm, and allowed for much more precision. As soon as Cheese found this technique, he knew it had a chance to break NES Tetris. He had just discovered Tetris's 3rd play style, rolling.
Yeah.
Although
Yeah,
it really had the
boy.
potential of all 3 techniques, it was also quite tricky to learn. Even though Cheese had discovered rolling, he struggled to use it for the first few months. But he still had a head start over other players. And eventually, he started to get good with it. By early 2021, he was using it whenever he reached the kill screen. And it quickly became clear that he was able to do things that nobody else could. Cheese wasn't just playing on the kill screen, he was thriving. The best hyper tappers could last a few levels on the kill screen, but with rolling, Cheese found himself making it all the way to level 40. And
What?
the kill screen kicks in way back at level 29.
I feel like I've never watched this
Simply
video
put,
before. It's one of my
the kill
favorite
screen
videos
had
ever.
lost its meaning. It no longer marked the automatic end of your game. At least if you were able to roll like Cheese could. By mid-2021,
Cheese, like Cheese
had the
05?
potential to
Like
take the
Mario
score record.
64 speedrunner?
Thanks to
Cheese
rolling,
05?
his strategy was much different than those who came before him. His emphasis was less on maximizing points before the kill screen, but rather going as deep as possible on the kill screen while landing Tetrises. This meant he wouldn't need such a crazy score going into level 29. If he could then last long enough on the kill screen, he could beat the score record anyway. That June, Cheese played games to qualify for the July monthly tournament. On June 30th, he got a game that reached 1 million points by level 26. This was roughly 200k behind the world record, but Cheese knew he could make up those points on the kill screen. He reached level 29
Wow.
and immediately misdropped the J piece. This could be a death sentence for a hyper tapper, but for a roller, it was an easy recovery. And from there, the gameplay just got crazier.
What the heck? Tetris? What? Oh, bro maxed out at level 46.
1 million.
Golly.
Cheese had just smashed the world record. He had just cleared 80 lines on the kill screen and gotten 5 Tetrises in the process. These were worth about 40,000.
Why am I going backwards?
Were only realistic with rolling.
Wee.
For any top player who is still hyper tapping, this game eliminated all doubt. Rolling was the future of NES Tetris.
BMX.
So, throughout 2021, the game's best players all improved that rolling. Previously, 1.4 million was about the limit for the score record, but now there was no telling how high it could go. Cheese had made it to level 37, but if someone could last even longer on the kill screen, or get more points before the kill screen, then they could beat the world record. The big
I
question
could.
was, Who would be the next person to do it?
Me.
Well, Dog playing Tetris was the winner of the most recent World Championships, while players Pixelandy and Hufflepuffus
Oh, I know.
came in second and third place. Meanwhile, Cheese was still an active player, and he was the best at rolling. All four of these players were top contenders, and they each had a good chance at raising the score record. However, in a surprise to most of the community, a player named Hydrant Dude moved into second place right behind Cheese. Hydrant Dude was more known for his contributions other than his gameplay. He made numerous ROM hacks in Tetris, and later published videos explaining the game's code and inner workings. Beyond that, he was also a good player, but not usually considered one of the absolute best in the world. But that changed when he posted a score of 1.445 million, because Hydrant Dude had developed one particularly important skill. He was really good at rolling, and that meant he could last a long time on the kill screen. Now just 16,000 points behind the record, Hydrant Dude pushed upward. And in September, he had a game that entered the kill screen at just over 1.1 million points. This pace was nothing too special, and he'd need more than 300,000 more points to break the record. But Hydrant Dude decided to take a different approach now. Instead of going for Tetris's, he was going to try to last as long as possible. He would have to survive for probably 15 or so levels if he wanted to accumulate 300,000 points. But like I said, Hydrant Dude was really good at rolling.
Woo! No!
Oh, there you go. There's a 19 feet. Is that world record? Did I actually just...
2 years ago, Hydrant Dude believed 1.4 million would never happen. Now, he had just broken the world record with 1.464 million points. And he had survived all the way to level 44. At this point, it was seeming increasingly likely that 1.5 million was on the horizon. Although Hydrant Dude had survived so long on the kill screen, his pace entering it wasn't anything special. If he could score a few more points beforehand, 1.5 million could be a reality. Well, Hydrant Dude kept playing, and just a few days later, he got the pace he was looking for. 1.35 million entering the kill screen. This was nearly a $250,000 ahead of the world record. After landing 3 Tetrises on the kill screen and making it to level 41, Hydrant Dude finally topped out. But his score wasn't 1.5 million. It was 1.6 million.
Whoa.
He had skipped straight over an F score and rolled the hexadecimal digit back to 0. This was the first ever rollover in NES Tetris history, and it was also a 160,000 point increase over the world record. Hydrant Dude had proven that he was no fluke. His Tetris skills were legit. But he also had some heavy competition. As more time passed, the top players got better and better at rolling. And by late 2021, Hufflepuffus was making a run at the record. Huff was already a world-class hyper tapper, finishing second place in the 2020 World Championships. But once rolling became dominant, he made the switch in technique and was able to nearly reach 1.4 million. Huff was notably a very conservative player on the kill screen. He played even safer than Hydrant Dude, rarely going for Tetrises and just trying to survive. In November 2021, Huff had a game that reached the kill screen at 1.15 million. This was nearly 200,000 behind the record and didn't seem to have much of a chance. But then, he put his survival mode into full effect, and the level counter climbed higher and higher. Level 35, then 40, and then 45. Huff had only landed 2 Tetrises, but he was somehow closing in on the record. A couple minutes later, Huff reached level 50. This was the highest level anyone had ever reached in NES Tetris. Finally, on level 52, Huff
Oh, and he
topped
got a
out.
record.
His score, 1.6 676 million.
Good
a
for
new
him.
world record for score, level, and points on the kill screen. His survival playstyle had worked to perfection, and it was unbelievable to watch. He had lasted through 23 levels on the kill screen. Rolling had forever changed NES Tetris. Gone were the days of needing to squeeze out every point before the kill screen ended your game. Now, players could just survive longer to make up those points. How high could this score go? By late 2021, the Tetris community was thriving.
Shit.
This was the most active it had ever been, and there was lots of competition for the score record. Rolling had given players who couldn't hypertap a second chance. They too now had a chance to snag the world record. And even though the top score was 1.67 million, it was climbing so fast that it seemed like a 2 million point game wasn't far away. However, over the next few months, it became very hard to track what the game's true world record was, all because of a practice known as vaulting. See, Cheese had a habit of playing games, sometimes even getting a world record score, and then only telling certain friends about it. Sometimes he did eventually upload his scores, and other times he didn't. Cheese gave various reasons for doing this: to better space out YouTube uploads, to make memes with his friends, and sometimes just because he could. So, we don't have a perfectly accurate record timeline, but we do know bits and pieces of it. In late 2021, Cheese allegedly achieved a new record of 1.7 million and didn't upload the video. However, it's unclear if this was before or after Huff's 1.676 million game, and we don't know what Cheese's exact score was. That being said, Cheese didn't vault all of his scores. He was an amazing player, and sometimes he had to play live, like when he had to qualify for a tournament. Since this was a qualifier, Cheese was just going for a decent score, not anything crazy. Well, 9 minutes later, he entered the kill screen at just 1.075 million. A good qualifying score, sure, but this was the lowest score at this point compared to any world record in the last 10 years. So, if he wanted a record here, this game would have to go deep. Cheese needed to pull off a miracle on the kill screen. For the next 13 levels, it wasn't looking like a miracle, but Cheese was surviving. He wasn't landing any Tetrises, so he didn't get many points, but he also wasn't topping out. Then, suddenly, he misdropped in level 43, and things got ugly fast. His stack piled high, and it looked like this was the end. Cheese's score was at 1.3 million, a fantastic qualifying score. He hadn't hit any Tetrises on the kill screen, and he was way short of the world record. Nobody would blame Cheese for just topping out here and being satisfied. But instead, he did this.
Oh my god.
1.8! 1.9! Let's go! Oh my god! 2 million! This is insanity, honestly. I never expected to get this high of a score. GG. That's a good game. Best game I'll ever play.
Cheese went from 0 Tetrises at 1.3 million points to 11 Tetrises and 2.3 million points. This was the biggest world record increase in the game's history, and also the first time anyone had ever reached level 60. Just a legendary game. The community was shaken. This score was so far ahead of anyone else. It was hard to imagine playing for so long while also landing Tetris after Tetris. The inventor of rolling had just mastered his craft. And over the next several months, Cheese's 2 million score stood alone. While others tried and did improve their scores, none were able to crack 2 million. The
God.
world record remained a major outlier. Yet, despite this, Cheese was able to improve it once again. In January 2022, he set a new high score of 2.7 million. But unfortunately, this was another vaulted score. The video of the game has never been made public, and what little info we do have comes from the description of Cheese's 2.3 million game. Then, a few months later, Cheese got a score of 2.34 million points on video while qualifying for the Open tournament. This eked out his highest recorded game, but was well short of his 2.7 million vaulted score. But no matter which of these three games you look at, Cheese was the premier player of NES Tetris. Nobody else could roll as long and as consistently as he could, and that's why he was the only player getting scores like this. But still, while they lagged behind Cheese, other players were improving their rolling skills. And with tournaments happening every month, there was active competition for the score record. One such competitor was Eric ICX. Eric was a good player, and he'd set some community milestones over the years. As a hyper tapper, he was the first person to reach levels 37 and 38. And while he was a good roller too, he lagged behind most other top players.
God.
His high score was just short of 1.5 million, and in 13th place overall. Well, on April 1st, 2022, Eric got a great game going. He entered the kill screen at 1.282 million points, a fantastic pace. Minutes later, he passed 1.5 million and broke his personal best. And then, Eric went on what can only be described as a miracle run. He landed a Tetris on level 46, then another on level 58. In level 64, he'd been playing for so long that his camera shut off, and moments later, he broke Cheese's recorded world record of 2.34 million. This was unreal. Eric was great, but he was not expected to be a world record contender. He hadn't even gotten 1.5 million before. Now, his score was passing 2.4 million, with no signs of stopping anytime soon. By this point, another concept would come into play: scaling. As mentioned earlier, when you get a Tetris, the amount of points it's worth is determined by this formula. Basically, the higher the level, the more points you get. When Eric first entered the kill screen on level 29, his Tetrises were worth 36,000 points. But now entering level 70, any Tetris would be worth 84,000 points. And as the level climbed higher, these Tetrises became even more valuable. That's what scaling is. It's essentially the opposite of diminishing returns. The longer you play, the quicker your score rises. And that's exactly what happened to Eric. By the time he hit level 73, he had passed Cheese's vaulted score of 2.73 million. This game was now the undisputed world record, and it was still going. Eric passed level 80, and then level 90. In level 92, he managed to hit a Tetris worth over 112,000 points.
Really?
In level 95, Eric topped out. His final score was 3.772 million. Eric had just broken the world record by over 1 million points. He had more than doubled his own personal best, and he had achieved the game's first ever double rollover. The hexadecimal digit rolls over for a second time at 3.2 million. When he posted his score to Discord, many dismissed it as an April Fool's joke, but they quickly realized this was legit. The world record had been shattered, and Eric was the new champion. So, what did this mean for the Tetris community? Was the world record now unbeatable? Well, look, getting a game to level 95 like Eric did would be close to impossible. This game was such an outlier that even Tetris's best players couldn't make it near that deep. But Eric's score was a different story.
Oh, I'm
Scaling
gonna
games
poop
with
myself.
Tetrises were worth 100 grand by the end of the game. So if someone
Gosh.
can reach level 70 or 80 again, and land a few more Tetrises than Eric, their score could shoot up past 3.7 million without having to make it as deep as level 95. It wasn't likely, but there was a path to beating his world record. And over the next few months, Some of the game's top players tried. They worked on surviving on the kill screen for as long as possible. Even if they didn't need to make it to level 95, they still had to last a long time. But ultimately, nobody could do it. And Eric's legendary 3.7 million score stayed on top. But of course, the NES Tetris community is much bigger than this one world record. Tournaments have always been a big part of Tetris, and each month there was a Masters tournament featuring most of the game's top players. The majority of these tournaments aren't important for this video, but there's one match in the August 2022 edition that we need to take a look at. It was a battle between two titans, Huff, the former world record holder, and Eric, the current record holder. And they were going to compete head-to-head in a best of 5. Eric's 3.7 million score still stood as the world record, but Huff was the only player who had come close to him. His personal best of 3 million points was in second place. These were quite possibly the two best Tetris players in the world, trying to score as high as they could against each other. Game 1 began, and it was clear both of these guys came to play. They both made it to the kill screen, before Huff finally topped out in level 41. Game 1 went to Eric. Game 2 began, and it looked like a repeat of Game 1. Both players were locked in and made it to the kill screen. But this time, Huff had a slight lead over Eric, 1.1 million to 950k. They both survived to level 40, with Huff retaining his point lead. A few minutes later, both players arrived at level 50, and at this point, the game was entering rare rate. In the entire history of Tetris monthly tournaments, only 4 games have ever survived to level 50.
Okay. Do not fumble the bag now. Do not fumble, do not fumble, do not fumble. If you fumble, you will be executed. Just don't fall into the void. Not now, at least. There we go. Deathless, second try of the day. Deathless, second try of the day. Second person to ever do it. Second big accomplishment today, because I did googoo mobile earlier. Well, recently, because technically not the same day anymore. But this is the first ever Deathless recorded. So not destined to be sub-hour. Could have been if I didn't take a few breaks in the middle just watching History of World Records on Tetris. Summoning Salt, you're my goat. Love you. I'm on a roll. Spring break has been goated. I think I got world record this spring break. Can't remember if I did. Well, recently, like these last 2 weeks, I got world record. I got all the badges I could with mobile in the Deathless. Oh yeah. This is like live footage. There's my username, whatever. Yay!